Hello, and thank you for joining today's demo, Maximizing Productivity and Strengthening Android Security with MaaS360. This is the second demo in a three-part series designed to introduce you to Enterprise Mobility Management fundamentals first, then take a deep dive on Android devices in your environment, and finally how to set up your MaaS360 portal. My name is Kayla Bittner, and I'm your webinar master moderating today's webinar. Lindsay Elgie, our mobile master from IBM, will be walking you through the MaaS360 portal, showing you how to manage Android devices in your environment in just a minute. Now, real quick, just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is expected to last 1 hour and is in listen-only mode. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so if you have a question, be sure to post it publicly in the Q&A panel at the bottom right corner of your screen. That way Lindsay can review your question. Please note the Q&A box is where Lindsay will be fielding your questions from first, so please be sure not to confuse this with the chat box. And finally, we are recording today's session, and we'll make the link to the recording available by email. So thank you again for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce IBM Mobile First Protect, formerly MaaS360, those of you not familiar with the product. The IBM Mobile First Protect platform delivers a complete enterprise mobility management solution. This one platform integrates comprehensive security to enhance employee productivity on their mobile devices and give organizations the confidence that their sensitive data is protected. There's five key solution bundles for total enterprise mobility. First, in the upper left is advanced management. It enables organizations to manage and secure enterprise-owned and personal bring-your-own smartphones, tablets, and laptops. It simplifies deploying private and public apps by delivering an easy-to-use enterprise app catalog with full security and operational lifecycle management. The Secure Productivity Suite delivers a comprehensive set of cross-platform solutions to isolate and contain work emails, web access, and app data to prevent data leaks. It's the only complete solution that enables employees to securely access corporate data while preserving the mobile experience on their devices. Secure Document Sharing provides a secure encrypted container and productivity suite to distribute, view, create, edit, and share documents on mobile devices, giving organizations the control they need and employees the access they demand. Mobile Enterprise Gateway offers simple and secure access to behind-the-firewall business resources such as SharePoint, Windows File Share, intranet sites, and databases. And we're excited about our newest product, Mobile Threat Management. Mobile malware is the next big security threat to every enterprise. With the trend towards bring your own device and proliferation of mobile apps, your enterprise data is especially vulnerable to rogue apps and malicious websites. Mobile Threat Management detects, analyzes, and remediates mobile risks, including malware, suspicious system configurations, and compromised, jailbroken, and rooted devices. Through integration with IBM Security Trust Tier, leveraged by hundreds of millions of end users to protect organizations against fraud and data breaches, IBM Mobile First Protect provides a new layer of mobile security to enterprise mobility management. All of these services work together seamlessly and provide multiple layers of management and security and granular level policy options for you to configure. So it truly is the most comprehensive enterprise mobility management platform in the market. Okay, so with that, I think we're ready to jump into the portal to see how to manage these Android devices. So Lindsay, over to you.
Great. Give me just one moment. I'll be sharing out my application so we can take a look at the administration of MaaS360. And today we are going to be focusing on the Android devices in your environment. So I'm going to enlarge the screen and then we can take a look. You should now be seeing my admin portal here. We'll give it a minute to refresh. MaaS360 is a cloud-based solution. So in terms of the administration, this is all performed from this website. So our web-based portal is where you'll access your devices that are enrolled, manage any policies, distribute content, etc. To start off with just the setup of our services, this will give you a good idea of everything that MaaS360 encompasses through those bundles that Kayla just touched on. Anything from the basics of your mobile device management, that lock, locate, and wipe functionality. We do have laptop and desktop management for OS 10.7 or higher and Windows XP Service Pack 3 or higher. Secure mail for that secure container to separate work from play, application management, content management, and then some features like our secure browser, which we'll take a look at in policy, and expense management for data-enabled devices. The enterprise email integration, this gives you integration with something like an Office 365 or Exchange environment or Lotus environment to give you a little bit more visibility and control of who's accessing your information. Once your services are established here, we also have some deployment settings you can take care of off the bat from the portal side of things. So as the administrator, you can do things like streamlining your corporate identifier here so that when your devices go to enroll, they enroll via a static URL. So your end users will visit that URL to enroll in MaaS360. They'll be prompted for their credentials. So you can see here authentication modes could be a unique passcode. It could be user credentials that are created locally, or we could integrate with your Active Directory or LDAP to leverage those familiar credentials and give you a little bit more integration with that environment that's already in place with your directory. We also have things like specifying which platforms are allowed to enroll, prompting for ownership. You can see here we can leverage the Android for Work container. We can also limit the number of devices a user can enroll in MaaS360. We can set that by grouping as well if you have specific groups that are maybe BYOD. And then we also have down below, I think is a handy feature, prompting the user to accept your corporate policy during enrollment. So the end user will have to actually accept a policy that you would upload as a custom end user license agreement during that enrollment process before the device can actually be managed by MaaS360, which is really helpful for personal devices so that the end user knows exactly what information you're collecting, what you can see and do, and kind of what the expectations are there. So once the devices go through that enrollment process, again, that's going to be via URL. You will have visibility in your device inventory here. So again, we have lots of different device platforms that we can see in the device inventory. Today we're going to be focused on the Android devices, so I will track down one of those for the sake of example. So I'm pulling up a Samsung here. All of your device records will appear this way, regardless of whether this is iOS, Android, Windows Phone. We do, as I mentioned, have Windows and Mac support for desktop and laptop management as well. And this is where you're going to get that basic MDM functionality for your lock, locate, and wipe features. There's some additional help desk features and some additional control we can take from here, one being reset passcode. So this is really handy on Android devices because you can choose to reset the passcode and wipe that clear. You can also prevent the end user from accessing the device by not providing the new passcode. So if you have an HR incident, for example, maybe the end user shouldn't be able to access their information or the device while it's being resolved, you can lock that device down with a new passcode and not deliver that to the end user until it's approved. You also have a feature called Selective Wipe, which is going to be really an important feature for personal devices because this gives you the ability to remove only information and settings that have been configured by MaaS360. So this is essentially removing corporate data while leaving the personal data intact. And this will remove anything from policy, email configuration, Wi-Fi configuration. All that gets lifted at one time, in addition to things like applications and that secure container and even document resources that you've provided. The really nice feature regarding the selective wipe is that it's a revocable action. So if you deliver a selective wipe, remove all of that information from a device, and you realize that maybe the end user has just misplaced their phone and they find it a couple hours later, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and start all over again. You can actually reverse the selective wipe by coming back into this device record. And all of those configurations will be delivered back to the device, and the end user will just need to re-authenticate to receive their information. Now this is, you of course have a full wipe option, so that's going to be along the lines of a factory restore. So that's not something you can come back from, you can't undo that. That's basically starting from scratch, but it is handy if you've got devices that are out in the field that maybe just need to be delivered to a new employee. You can perform that over-the-air wipe and they can re-enroll in MaaS360 with their credentials, and you've onboarded your new employee with all of their corporate resources at that point. You have some shortcuts for changing policies and rule sets, data plans, and also distributing applications and documents to this particular device. And then you have a feature called Remove Control, which is just that. It's removing MaaS360 control of the device, and it's also performing a selective wipe. So it's really nice for offboarding employees because you don't have to be hands-on with their devices. You don't have to make sure that they don't have their email configurations. You also don't have to fully wipe their device in that kind of legacy exchange wipe. You can remove your work data. They can go on their way with their personal information, and everybody's happy there. We do have buzz commands, so this is just going to sound an alarm on the device, but this is helpful if maybe you've got delivery drivers who are losing tablets under their car seats, maybe a phone that's left in the conference room, help it track it down audibly. You also have a message feature, which is really great because you can perform a message down to one single device, and this is going to appear on the device screen in addition to the MaaS360 application. You can also create device groups and push a message that way. So if you needed to send a message maybe to all of your administrators, or perhaps all of the tablets that are kiosked in cars, or maybe you just have an update on a meeting time for your management team, you can send those messages down without having to rely on whether someone's going to check their email before they need to be addressing this situation. We, of course, have a locate button here. So this is going to be a snapshot of this device's whereabouts. We also have a location information on the left-hand side, which is going to give you what we call a breadcrumb trail, which is more of a location history for you. So this is really handy if you're providing devices to your end users and they're expected to be performing a certain number of stops, or maybe you have traveling salespeople. You'll be able to see exactly where this device has checked in over a period of time. That does go back as far as 90 days, so that you can view a month at a time of their check-ins. Now, for personal devices, we do have privacy filters. If this is a concern, you can disable the collection of this location information based on ownership or even based on grouping. So if you have maybe a CIO that doesn't want to be tracked, or maybe your upper management doesn't want to be tracked, we can make sure that we're not infringing on anyone's privacy concerns or stepping on anyone's toes that might be higher up. In regards to the privacy laws that we can kind of enforce through MaaS360, we also have application inventory that's collected, and this can be disabled from view as well. So if you're concerned about seeing things like Facebook and Snapchat, and you don't really care about whether those apps are installed or not, maybe they're personal devices, we can disable the view of those applications, and we can still see what's been distributed for work purposes. So you'll always have your app distributions because those are corporate apps that have come from MaaS360, but you will not be able to view those personal applications if you've got that privacy filter enabled. In regards to the information that we're collecting, obviously there's a wealth of detail here that we can provide to the administrators. We can see the manufacturer information, the free internal storage, and the RAM. You can see your battery condition here, so you can kind of use this for your inventory purposes. We'll also see down below security and compliance, which is going to have a lot of important information for the admin. In terms of their security environment, you can see whether the device has been rooted, whether the device is encrypted. We also have whether we're allowing mock locations and sideloading of applications. And then you'll get a rundown of your policy and compliance. So you'll see the general compliance state. So we can see I'm in compliance here. If I were to report out of compliance on this device, we would have the reasons listed here on the left-hand side. So this is nice because you'll also see things like your passcode settings if it's enforced, and just kind of gives you an overall rundown of all of this important information for compliance reasons. Threat management I'm going to come back to because we do have an example of a device that's been compromised in the portal, so I'll show that in a moment. You'll get ActiveSync rundowns here and network information, which can be extremely helpful for tablets that are carrier enabled because that can be difficult to keep track of the phone number here. So if you'd like to keep track of your carrier details, we have the ability to provide that information under the network information, and we'll also touch on the expense monitoring as well for your plans. You will get Wi-Fi information down below, Bluetooth MAC address. We have the location information, which we already looked at, and the apps installed. We can also see things like documents downloaded on this device. So documents that are being distributed through MaaS360 are going to be housed in our secure container. So if we were pushing documents by the portal here, we'll touch on that workflow. You'd be able to see whether the document has been accessed or not. You can see whether it's been opened, what the version was, and what the download sources are. So we'll touch on the sources as well, but this would give a nice rundown. For example, if you had mandatory reading, you can make sure that maybe an employee handbook had been opened. We do have certificate integration. If you have a CA in your environment, we can leverage that integration with our cloud extender. We also have a secure browser where we can provide a filtered browser if you are providing devices to your end users and you want to make sure that the web activity is work appropriate. This is really helpful for school environments, maybe to lock down anything that's over a certain age range, or maybe just to make sure that everyone stays productive and on task. We will get a rundown of our data usage for this device if this is on our expense monitoring here. And custom attributes is especially helpful because this will allow you to set up some asset tracking tags that are a little more specific to your environment. So we, of course, give you some canned tags here that would be applicable to a lot of environments. But if you had maybe a specific cost center or a way of tracking these devices, or you just wanted to add Verizon or AT&T upgrade dates to your devices in the portal, we can create that with our custom attributes. And then one nice thing is that on the home screen, we have this alert center where we can create an interactive dashboard, creating search tiles based on what you really want to see there. So our red and green tiles, luckily we don't have any red tiles today. Those typically need some sort of attention by the administrator. We can have green tiles that are in compliance or no concerns. These can really search for any compliance issues that you might have. So high data usage, rooted devices, low battery. We also have these blue tiles that are more informational for you, so you can see that we've got one battery that needs to be replaced, for example. So just nice visibility for the administrator and very customizable. You can add as many alerts as you need, and you can search for any of those conditions that we're pulling within the device record there. From the home screen, we also have device locations. So if you wanted a map view of where everyone's checked in at the moment, you will get that from the home screen in your alert center. And if we click on one of these pin drops, we can see all the devices that are currently checked in that area. We can drill into more detail and make sure that we're addressing all of the concerns in terms of whereabouts for your end users. On the right-hand side, the activity feed is pretty helpful because you'll have a rundown of all of the activity that's going on within your portal. You can also search by recent additions, compliance events, cloud extender alerts for that integration, if there's any concerns there, and just general updates to your portal. And then above there, we do have radio buttons for adding devices, users, applications, and documents, and a nice rundown of what's already making up your environment today. I'm going to pull up an Android policy here under our security policies, and this is a device-level policy that's going to be specific to the Android platform. You can have as many policies as you need, and you can really customize these to fit who you're working with and what your management concerns are. So, you know, if you need 15 different policies for 150 different devices, that's certainly doable. We even have customers who need one policy that fits all. So we can make sure that that's something that we're addressing so that everyone's falling into the appropriate management here. From the device settings, this is where we start looking at enforcing expectations. So passcode policy, this is where you can set the minimum expectations for what kind of passcode policy you would like on these devices. If you'd like to allow fingerprint and that device is compatible, you can see on the right-hand side we've got our compatible APIs and operating systems, so you can make sure that what you're applying through policy is applicable to the majority of your devices in the environment. Security-wise, this is where we start looking at addressing different security concerns such as device encryption. We can enforce that where hardware allows. We can disallow over-the-air upgrades. We can allow or disallow installation of applications or uninstallation of applications, even allowing or disallowing sideloading of applications, clipboard for cut, copy, paste, screen capture, and even backup to Google if there are concerns there. This is a big one also for Samsung Safe devices, allowing or disallowing factory reset of the device. So again, a lot of control in terms of security settings for the device. And then we do have device-level restrictions we can look at as well. So this is more looking at device features that we would want to allow or disallow, such as the camera or SD card, USB storage, audio and video, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. So there's a lot of device-level features that could be of concern here that we can enable and disable based on who we're looking to manage and how secure that device needs to be. Application compliance allows us to set expectations in terms of applications that should or should not be on this device. So a little more lenient would be our blacklist here. Our applications can be added to the blacklist, and this is essentially saying that these applications are not allowed on this device. Anything on the blacklist will put that device out of compliance, and we also have these enforcement actions where we can prompt the user to uninstall the application, or we can just block the application from being used altogether. Now, if this is a little too lenient and you'd like to lock things down a little bit more, you can create a whitelist where you're really just specifying which apps are okay. So if you have maybe 5 or 6 applications that should be used on this device, you can whitelist them here, and then anything that's not on this whitelist, you're going to have that enforcement action. So again, either prompting to uninstall or blocking from use. We also have the ability to configure required apps. So if you have applications that are absolutely mandatory, they have to be on these devices for whatever reason, you can create compliance around that so that you are aware as soon as possible if an application has been removed. Now, trustier threat management, this is the area that I wanted to come back to because we're going to enable trustier through this policy here. And once this area is enabled through policy, we have these remediation actions where we can either report on an infraction or we can prompt the user to uninstall the application. Now, if we have applications that are being flagged, we can bypass them if we need to. So if there's maybe an exception here, we can whitelist that as an exception so that it's not flagged every time we run trustier. And I do want to pull up that device to take a look at what happens when a device is compromised by malware so that you can see that trustier integration in action. Now this device is no longer enrolled, but we do have visibility. So basically what's happening here is we're able to look at this device and see that we're out of compliance and there's a lot of malware detected. So basically what we're doing here is we're working with integration with IBM's Trustier software to reference their known database of malware signatures. And if we detect any of those malware signatures, we have a device that's out of compliance and actions that are taking place to give you that visibility. So this device is out of compliance. We can see in our threat management tab all of the issues that are coming up. In addition to the last configuration update, we can see we're up to date here. Is our Wi-Fi security connected? No, it's not secure. So a lot of visibility here in addition to some system configurations that might be suspicious. So an unknown SMS listener and an unknown startup package. So there's a lot of visibility here for the admin that may be concerned about what's taking place, especially on an Android device where it's not quite as locked down from the App Store as maybe the iTunes App Store would be. So this is nice because we now have an out-of-compliance device and we can take action on this device automatically through that policy. We can also just create visibility around the threat management itself. Now we're going to talk about the automated actions in our compliance rules momentarily. I do want to finish up a couple of things in our Android policy though now that we've looked at trustier integration. Because finishing out this policy is where you also have the ability to configure the delivery of some work information. So we've already looked at the restrictions such as turning off your camera, maybe enforcing hard drive encryption or SD card encryption, and then we can look at delivering configurations such as maybe our email and our Wi-Fi and our VPN. So ActiveSync here we can configure to deliver through policy so that if you have maybe 10 devices enrolling in the same policy, they're all going to receive that ActiveSync configuration at the same time. All they'll need to do is authenticate. That way, as the administrator, you don't have to be hands-on configuring everyone's email inbox. Hopefully this will alleviate some help desk concerns and phone calls and just streamline things so that if you do have a compliance event or some sort of issue with a device, you have the ability to remove this email configuration automatically. We do have the ability to configure Wi-Fi networks, so this is really handy if you've got multiple networks. You can set up these SSIDs with their passwords if you'd like. The passwords can be hidden from the end user so that if you have to remove this network for some reason, you haven't compromised that password or the network security. This is really helpful because the more information you deliver through MaaS360, the more you can take back in the event that a device is out of compliance or compromised. The VPN configurations are also going to be delivered via MaaS360, so you can choose your configurations and that will push right down to your end user as they enroll and remove once you selectively wipe or fully wipe a device. We do have web shortcuts here, so if you wanted to push any shortcuts, you could do that from MaaS360's policy. You can also add new icons here so you can make it very personalized for your environment. And then device management is a big one for Android devices because you have the ability to prevent the end user from disabling MaaS360. So you can set an admin passcode if you wanted to bypass this. You can see this is specific to Samsung Safe and LG. And then you have some enforcement actions with the devices out of compliance. You can lock, block, or wipe. You also have application timers down below. So if you've got a device maybe that's out on the road, you've got some drivers that have kiosk tablets or something of that nature, you can increase the collection of some of this information if you wanted to, particularly location data, for example. If you wanted your end users to check in to MaaS360 so that you could see those whereabouts, the default time is 60 minutes. This can be reduced down to 15 minutes if you'd like, 15-minute increments to see those check-ins on our location information or our breadcrumb. Now this comes with the cost of a reduction in battery life, so that is something to kind of keep in mind and weigh your options there. Which is more important? Does this person have a constant source of power for this device? Is it always plugged into a car, for example? But it can be increased if you wanted to collect that information more frequently. Our advanced settings here, so email configuration here is going to be our POP or our IMAP configs, so that can be distributed through MaaS360 policy as well. We also have configurations to personalize these devices a little bit. If you wanted to add wallpapers, you could do that from policy. You can configure lock screen here, so if you wanted to configure on a Samsung Safe device, what exactly appears on a lock screen, you can do that. We also have network configuration for restrictions. So if we wanted to, we could allow emergency calls only. We can whitelist and blacklist Wi-Fi SSIDs. So if there are concerns about specific networks that maybe that end user should not be connecting to, And we also can set minimum security levels. So this is something that Android gives us for Samsung Safe devices that's really popular for security concerns, because you can make sure that your users aren't just connecting to any old network and possibly compromising your enterprise information. The next setting here, allowing the user to add Wi-Fi networks. So you can disable the end user's capability of adding Wi-Fi networks to their device if you have distributed a Wi-Fi network through policy. So if you've configured the work network and you don't want any other networks configured on that device, you can disable this feature for the end user. Now the kiosk mode is an area for restrictions that I wanted to talk about in terms of locking down the device a little bit further than app configurations for compliance. We looked at our app compliance where we could whitelist or blacklist applications, and kiosk mode takes that a little bit further in terms of locking the device down to only approved applications, and even blocking things such as your multi-window mode, your task manager, system bar, navigation bar, status bar. All of these things can be disabled so that the only features that the end user can access are approved applications. So you have the option of configuring a custom homepage with approved applications. So, for example, these 4 app IDs that we're whitelisting here would be the only thing on that home page for the end user. For Samsung Safe devices, we can automatically launch into a specific application. So if you want your end user to turn on a Samsung device and launch right into that app and not give them access to any other features of the device except for that one application, that's certainly doable through kiosk mode restrictions. Now in Android policy, we also have NOx settings where we can configure a NOx container on your devices. So we can add our license key information here. We can set our selective wipe, whether we want to lock the container or remove the container. We can set passcode requirements. So again, we're taking all of these NOx features into the policy and distributing them to multiple devices at one time. And then we do have restrictions here, disabling the camera, the share via applications, app compliance in general, so restricted applications and whitelisted apps for the NOx container itself. And then accounts here where you can configure allowed accounts. So you can whitelist or blacklist. You can wildcard also to pull in from what we've already configured via integration. And we can set browser restrictions here. So we can configure these browser restrictions, maybe accepting cookies, maybe we don't want to, depending on your concerns. We really make all of the features available to you, and then you can determine how this applies to your environment and what you feel comfortable with on these devices. This access and configuration here is going to be in the NOx container itself rather than the device settings where we're delivering that to the native mail setting. So this is going to be a separate active sync configuration here specifically for Samsung NOx. We do also have Android for Work settings. So if you are utilizing Android for Work with Google, we can configure those settings via policy as well for that separate partition. You can see that some of these features are supported on the Work app, some are supported on the Work native. Again, we're providing all of the features that are given to us, and then you can determine what really addresses your concerns. So again, things like screen capture, notifications, side-loading applications, configuring restrictions for things like USB debugging, for example, and then also whitelisting accounts if you wanted to configure account restrictions or account types that you wanted to restrict. We also have an active sync configuration here. So again, this is specific to the Android for Work settings, so it's going to be a completely separate configuration from the device level settings that we looked at. So Android for Work, Samsung NOx, these are programs that you can opt into. If you're interested in more information about either one of these programs, this is a little bit more streamlined for enterprise environments, so we can certainly set up one-on-one demos to discuss how this might fit into your environment. So now that we've gotten the device level policy configured here, compliance rules takes us to where we can take automated action if a device is out of compliance. So for example, maybe we've restricted an application, Instagram for example. Let's say we've blacklisted Instagram, we don't want that present on any of our devices. Someone installs Instagram. We can look at our applicable platforms here, we can look at our event notification recipients. So if you have managers that want to be alerted when there's a compliance event, you can set their emails. And we also have exemption. So this is for maybe your CIO who doesn't ever want their email wiped. We can make sure that they're exempt from your rules without actually having to give you kind of the blocking of what's happening on their device. You'll still get notifications, but they will not fall under the enforcement actions here. So if we've taken that enforcement rule for application compliance, we've blacklisted Instagram, we see that someone has installed Instagram, we have an automated action that can take place here. So immediately out of compliance, we have an alert that can be sent down that maybe just notifies the end user that they're out of compliance and they need to remove this application as soon as possible. Maybe they have 2 hours to comply. 2 hours later, they still haven't removed Instagram. Maybe we want to change their policy and we want to take away their camera functionality. So, okay, you have Instagram, but you can't use your camera. So they're going to get a notification. They know that they're out of compliance. You're taking this automated action, but the admin is being notified as well. Maybe 24 hours later, they still haven't removed that application. We can selectively wipe all of our work information until they're back into compliance. We also have things like a full wipe of the device, a remove control, or a block, which is utilizing MaaS360's Cloud Extender. This is a block of the device on your mail server, and it utilizes Cloud Extender for integration into your Office 365 or Exchange or Lotus or Google Apps environment, and it gives you the ability to leverage Cloud Extender to send a PowerShell command that blocks mail delivery for devices that are out of compliance or not enrolled in MaaS360. So this is really helpful if you've got concerns about maybe a BYOD environment and people just kind of configuring ActiveSync on their own. You'll have visibility of all of the ActiveSync enabled devices through MaaS360. You'll have that device record present, and you'll also have these trigger actions. So if we see that a device is not enrolled in MaaS360 but is trying to receive mail, we can set them as out of compliance and block that mail delivery using PowerShell, and then we can send a new enrollment request via email. So these enforcement rules are really great because they're keeping an eye on things for the admin, they're keeping the admin aware of what's going on, but these actions are happening automatically and you don't have to log in and babysit these devices. Once this device is enrolled or Instagram is removed or the device is back into compliance or maybe they needed to get into a specific encryption status to be in compliance, you know, the action is going to reverse itself and the end user is going to be placed back into their normal policy. So from the admin perspective, you have the visibility of your concerns and you know that someone's out of compliance, but you don't actually have to log in and hold hands or take action or provide their email configurations again once they're back into compliance. Geofencing is leveraging those enforcement actions for location compliance. So for example, if you have a secure warehouse or a secure work location where you'd prefer that there are no photos taken, maybe you work in a medical facility and you're concerned about HIPAA compliance, we have the ability to detect that a device has checked into a location, which can be either a physical address or a Wi-Fi network, and we can take enforcement actions based on that check-in. So in this situation, we'd be changing the policy to a new policy that disables the camera. So while that device is checked into your secure location, they don't have the use of their camera. When they check out for their lunch break or they go home for the day, they're put back on their normal policy because they've checked out of that location. So that restriction has been lifted and they've been restored to their normal policy. You can also use this for a selective wipe, which is really helpful for devices that are maybe kiosked in a casino or a retail establishment or an educational establishment where the devices really aren't supposed to be leaving the facility for any reason. So you can take these enforcement actions. Maybe you want a notification as soon as the device checks out, and then we want to selectively wipe all of your sensitive information. So this gives you the visibility that you need. You know that a device has left. You can send a notification down. You can message that end user. So you can, again, leverage these to kind of work with your enforcement actions to make sure you're addressing the concerns of your specific environment. Now, expense monitoring rules gives us the ability to set compliance around data usage on a device. So again, we talked a little bit about the expense plan here and the carrier-enabled devices. So we can manage our plan here. We can set up, maybe everyone gets 4 gigs of data a month. So that's in compliance. You use 4 gigs or less, you're in compliance. We also have the in-network mobile data usage where we can set different thresholds where we can take action. So, for example, maybe 50 and 70%, we just want to send alert notifications to the end user and or the admin that they've used this much data so far this month. Maybe if they've exceeded their data limit, they get a new policy that puts a little more restriction on their device or maybe takes away some of the fun stuff that might be contributing to their data overage. So while this is not a breakdown of a per app data usage, it will give you device as a whole, and you can see in our reporting section which device has used how much data on a daily basis. So again, you have that visibility. You can take these automated actions, and while we can't block or throttle data, we can at least hopefully slow down the use of the device a little bit so that the end user is aware of where they stand with their data usage and maybe take away some of that functionality that's a little more fun that could contribute to those overages until the next month resets. Now, in terms of the devices accessing corporate resources in a secure container. That is something that we do give the capabilities for, and I'm going to pull up the policy here where we would configure that container. When the container is configured, this is allowing you to configure the services that the end user might need in a secure encrypted location on that device, which is really just the MaaS360 application. So when we are looking at our services, we have our secure mail, email contacts calendar that we're leveraging ActiveSync to deliver, browser for a fully functional browser where we can set policy around what's acceptable in that browser. We have a workplace container for applications that are leveraging our SDK, document syncing and document viewer for Android devices, and even a secure editor. So all of these services make up our secure productivity suite and our series of applications that makes up our containerization. The passcode here is on the application level. So this is really great for personal devices where you may just want to restrict the authentication to accessing work information. So if you'd like to set a passcode on your work container where you're housing email, contacts, calendar, you can set passcode requirements. You can leverage your corporate passcode as policy. You can also configure security around the device as well. So, for example, if we've detected that someone has rooted their device, we can block access to the container until that issue has been resolved. We can also set a time bomb anywhere from a week to a year, where if that device has not accessed its container with its work information, we can perform a selective wipe automatically. So this is really great if you don't have eyes on a personal device that maybe someone has handed down to a younger sibling, maybe they've locked it in their desk drawer and they don't intend to use it for a while. You can make sure that your work information is not just floating around on an unaccompanied device there. We also have data protection policies, which is really what starts to make up our containerization. Data protection gives you the ability to set data leakage prevention measures, such as a file export, for example, where we would have to whitelist any applications that are third-party to communicate with our email attachments, our documents, our secure resources. We also have things like cut, copy, paste, file screenshot within the container itself, importing files, importing photos. All of this can be restricted, so that if you were to perform a selective wipe on a device and remove that container, there's no information that's left on the personal or native side of the device that we can't remove without a full wipe. So essentially what you're doing is you're saying, here's your work container, here's all of the access that you need, all the productivity tools that you need, but if your device falls out of compliance or you leave the company, we have the ability to take it all back. So the nice thing is that this could even include your email configurations. So if we want to use ActiveSync to deliver email, we can set up contact settings so that maybe your sales department can't leave the company with their sales book intact. You can selectively wipe that in the container. You can also set security around your emails themselves. So if you've got emails with attachments and you have concerns about that information being forwarded, you can set that up so that other domains can't receive that email forwarding unless you've whitelisted them as an exception here. So if you're working with third parties and vendors, they can be allowed domains, but anyone else, maybe a Google or a Yahoo domain, wouldn't be able to receive those email attachment forwards. This also applies to email to external domains altogether. And you can see on the right-hand side the platforms that support these different features. So iOS and Android are prevalent. Windows Phone has some of the basic functionality that's just constantly growing based on what we're getting from Microsoft. So these are always changing, and all of our vendors are kind of always adding to this functionality. But at the very least, we do have that secure container and the data leakage prevention for the iOS, Android, and Windows Phone platforms if you do have a mixed environment. Now, the secure browser, this is an area where we can configure the browser to deliver to our enrolled devices, and we can choose to do this in addition to any browsers that might already be on the device if you just wanted to push down some work bookmarks, for example. If you have concerns about the browsing activity on the devices, we can also restrict the use of the native browser in policy and make sure that this browser is delivered, and we're kind of forcing traffic through that browser instead. And the advantage here is that we have a couple of settings, like kiosk mode, for example, where we're disabling navigation away from this URL. We also have URL filtering. So if you wanted to restrict different categories of websites, you can scroll through here. There's a lot of inappropriate content, as you can see in the categories, and then you can choose which categories you want to block. Now, some people will choose these categories, as you can see here, and you can allow and track. So you can allow the end user to access these websites, but the admin will have visibility. You can also block and track, so you can block the websites and get visibility of who's trying to visit, or you can just block altogether and say that this category cannot be visited by any of your end users. You don't really need to see who's trying to access. Now, you also have allowed URLs and domains and blacklisted URLs and domains. So if you wanted to piece together, maybe we want to come up here and block all categories. We can block all categories of websites. That'll pop up there. We can get rid of these other areas, and then we can configure only whitelisted websites. So if you want to be very specific about what sites can be accessed by your end users, it's really just going to be the sites or domains that are allowed within this whitelist here. Now, the Mobile Enterprise Gateway is a piece of software that we provide as a module to that cloud extender, and it will grant you access to internal resources such as an intranet site in this example for a secure browser. And it's just really leveraging an SSL tunnel, and then your user directory for authentication purposes. So if you wanted to grant intranet access to your end users on their mobile devices without having to leverage a VPN session every time, the Mobile Enterprise Gateway could do that here. We could also leverage the Mobile Enterprise Gateway as a content source for document resources. Whoops. So if you wanted to provide access, for example, to a Microsoft SharePoint site or a file share on your Windows system, we can leverage that Mobile Enterprise Gateway to deliver that access in our container. And the nice thing is that that falls within our security of our container, so we can leverage our persona policy that we just looked at with those workplace settings to extend that to your document sources. So you have the option of the workplace settings, restricting export, or no restrictions at all. You can see there's plenty of other content sources here, so things like OneDrive for Business, Box for Enterprise, Google Drive. We can add a CMIS-based content source down below, and we also have IBM Connections files as well. So those would be the content sources where you would have the source intact in your environment, and we'd provide that SSL tunnel. Now, if you have documents that you just want to push out to your end users by uploading and distributing in MaaS360, you can do that as well. So we can browse for our files or folders, or we can provide a public-facing URL. Any security settings that are not already in place in our container, we can leverage here, and then download policies such as maybe download only on Wi-Fi or restricting delete after download. And our distribution targets, this can be everyone. It can be a specific group. What's nice about this is that with that AD or LDAP integration, we can target groups that are already existing in your directory. So if you have a marketing group in your AD and you want to make sure that they're the ones that get this documentation, you can pull that up right from MaaS360, choose that group, and then set even a start and expiration time if you want that to apply. So if this is a marketing promotion that ends next month, you can make sure that at the end of the month, it's no longer accessible to that team distribution. All of that information, again, is considered corporate information that's housed within our container. Application-wise, we also have the ability to configure distributions of public applications from the Google Play Store. For example, maybe we want to distribute the MaaS360 secure browser. We can pull up that MaaS360 browser and we can specify who should receive this application. So again, we have a specific device, a group, or everyone. We can have multiple distributions if we need them. And then we can specify when we want to remove that application and any security policies that might be in place. So if we want to enforce compliance of the device and authentication before accessing, we can do that upon distribution, and then when we click Add, that end user will receive an app catalog that's branded by your business where they can access any work-appropriate applications that you've distributed. Now, this is an example of a public application. We can also work with internal applications if you've got an APK file. So you can upload your APK file that you've got for an application that was distributed internally or developed internally, and then you can specify again when we're removing that application and any instant install settings. One nice thing is that we have the ability to what's called app wrapping. We can provide app wrapping by extending our workplace policies to your application. So with just a checkbox, we're going to take that workplace policy from our container and pull that into your application. And then if necessary, we can also provide you with our SDK so that you can work our more advanced security into your application as well. Again, the nice thing is that the more information you send through MaaS360, the more you can pull back. If you've got a compliance event or an out-of-compliance device, or you just lost track of a device or need to offboard an employee. The last thing that I want to talk about here is our reporting. There's obviously a wealth of information that's available via our device records and the visibility that we've got within MaaS360. This is a nice example of one of our more visual reports. You can see the different versions here, vulnerabilities, for example. You can also configure these reports via a more detailed spreadsheet version and customize exactly what you'd like to see here displayed in your report. And then you can export for one-time use or create subscriptions. So a really great example, maybe someone wants to see those data usage reports on a monthly basis because they process your carrier bill. So you can come in here, you can specify exactly what version of the report you'd like to view based on your customizations, and then you can hop into your subscription here, and we can specify exactly which email recipients should receive this email on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So if you've got a problem child, maybe someone who's repeatedly going over their data usage, maybe their manager wants to see this on a weekly basis. If this is someone that's just processing your carrier bill, maybe they want it a little bit before they receive that bill, and they can charge back any data overages to a department, for example. And the last piece that I have here is our mobile metrics. This is an area where we provide reporting based on anonymized contributions from our current MaaS360 customers. So you can see exactly how a comparable industry and size would be using MaaS360 in comparison to your environment. So how they're authenticating during enrollment, whether they're supporting BYOD programs. You can see there's not a lot of BYOD in healthcare right now based on our customer reporting. But you can also see the device types that they're allowing and even which applications they're blacklisting. So one thing that's important to note is that our customer support model is that we are always available for you. So that's 24/7, 365 customer support via phone, email, or chat. You can see my chat bubble up top here for support. We also have one-on-one calls just like this where we can walk you through setting up your deployment, personalizing your portal, setting up your policies, even performing that integration with Cloud Extender and Mobile Enterprise Gateway, and that's all included as a trial or a full MaaS360 customer. So there's a lot of support available to you, or really as much or as little as you need us. But it is certainly here through the mobile metrics or through our one-on-one support with our engineering team. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and take a breath and just take a look at some of these questions that we've gotten in here. So I'm going to take a pause and give Kayla control for a minute here.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. So while Lindsay's taking a moment here to catch a breath and review your questions, I just wanted to take this time to remind you that this is a three-part series. This is part 2 of 3. So in 2 weeks, we'll have the last session, which is how to set up your portal. So we'll go through how to sign up for your free trial, set up your portal, configure your policies, and enroll devices. So I'm going to go ahead and share the link to register for that in the chat now. We'll also be sure to include the link to register for that next session in our follow-up email, which, as a reminder, we will be sending out the follow-up email with the recording and slides so that you can share anything you learned from today's event with your colleagues or see anything you missed. So be sure to watch your inbox for that. So here is the link in the chat to register for that next demo. And we'll dedicate the rest of the time here to your questions. So if you have a question, be sure to post it publicly in the Q&A box for Lindsay to review, and I'll let her take it from here.
Thanks, Kayla. Let's see. So I have a question here. Is it best to separate the container policy and the device policy? What is best practice? So our device level policy would be our MDM policy that we looked at for things like your camera functionality. That is going to be a separate policy from our container policy, which is our persona. And the reason for that is that they work a little bit differently in terms of what they're managing. So a device level policy would be our MDM policy, and that would be applied to each device. Each device is going to have an MDM policy where you're setting up restrictions or delivering content or configurations. And then on top of that, if you wanted to configure the container, our persona policy is based on user. So a good way to think of it is maybe I've got a Samsung tablet and an iOS phone. If I am enrolled in MaaS360, my Samsung tablet would have to have a Samsung or an Android MDM policy in addition to my iOS device having an iOS policy. Now, if I have a container on both, I just need one policy that says Lindsay's allowed to do this with her information. So a nice way to think of it is that my persona policy will follow me regardless of what kind of device it is to make sure that my data is protected under the same requirements at all times. Whereas my device might be managed a little bit differently based on ownership or based on compliance state or something of that nature. So typically best practice would be that we would see an MDM policy that kind of addresses the device level concerns, and then a user policy for the container that's going to address more of the data security aspect. I also have a question here. Can you see text messages the user sends, and what about browsing with a browser that is, I'm assuming, not the secure browser that we provide? We do not have visibility of either one of those pieces of information, largely because we don't have that kind of visibility into the native device. For security reasons and for your protection, really, we don't have access to the personal information, which is considered the native data. So text message-wise, we don't have that capability of seeing what the user is sending. We do have integration with some secure texting resources, such as maybe a Tiger Text or Armor Chat, and those are applications that we've partnered with on the public side of things through the MaaS360 market, so that we can extend our security to customers of those applications. So if that's something you're looking for in the realm of secure texting, we can certainly help with that if you wanted to get in touch regarding a demo and just kind of discussing how we would set that up. In terms of another browser outside of what we would provide, it is not possible to see that history. This is largely why we provide a secure browser, is because the native functionality is really just us turning it on or off. Are they allowed to use it or not? We can't see what they're doing with it. We can't see what they're accessing. We can't block what they're accessing either. So with the secure browser, we'd be more looking at turning off the native browser and blacklisting third-party browsers so that they can't be accessed, so that the only browsing option really would be our secure browser for that visibility. I have a question. Can I push out apps to specific policies only, not groups or devices? You wouldn't be distributing applications through policy. You would be more setting compliance around applications through policy. So you can blacklist or whitelist through policy, but you wouldn't be distributing to a policy. You would more have it set up so that maybe policy A is a default policy for your marketing group, and your marketing group also falls into a group-based distribution for apps. So the policy is kind of not related to the distribution of applications. The distribution would be more related to a specific group or a specific device. And if there's a concern there, feel free to follow up so that we can make sure that we address the concern that you're looking for, so that that would be an automated process for you. Let's see. When deploying a large number of corporate-owned Android devices, is it best to let the users install apps themselves? Do we still have full control over the managed apps? So managed applications are considered apps that are distributed through MaaS360 and installed through our corporate application catalog. Typically, we would see that the end user would install applications themselves, especially in a large deployment, because any apps that come from the public app store is going to require an app ID, whether that's Google Play or an iTunes App Store ID. The end user is going to have to be able to install applications if they're public. So if you've got anything at all coming from the Google Play Store, I would recommend the end users kind of have that set up and install the apps themselves, because you're going to have the compliance capabilities of setting restrictions around what should be installed. You'll have the ability of leveraging those compliance events to take place if someone has installed something you don't like. And you'll also have visibility over making sure that the end users have what's required. So typically, some of it's reactionary, some of it's proactive for us. But if they are public applications, the end user would need that control. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of admin time in the portal managing whether the App Store is turned on or off. Samsung Knox has a specialized over-the-air bulk enrollment similar to Apple's DEP. Are you familiar with anything like that for Android in general for MaaS360? We do work with the Samsung Knox enrollment. In terms of devices that are not coming through Samsung Knox, we have something called Android Configurator. It's not really going to streamline the enrollment, though. That's more for if there are concerns about Google Play IDs and no public applications being installed. So it's not, the streamlining of the enrollment is really going to be specific to Samsung Knox for the Android side of things. But certainly if they make anything available on a public basis, we'd be happy to keep you apprised of that. We're constantly updating our capabilities based on what the vendors are providing us. But right now there's not a whole lot outside of those specialized programs like Samsung Knox or Android for Work. Can MaaS360 filter traffic application data? Is it possible to install antivirus? So we would not provide an antivirus. We would be providing that Trusteer integration. we could certainly push an antivirus application if you had one that you're using for work purposes. We could distribute that and make sure that it's on the devices, and we can make it a required app and set compliance around that. So that's certainly possible if you wanted to use that, instead of or in conjunction with trustier malware detection. In terms of application data, we don't have per app data tracking. It's more of an overall data tracking of which device has used how much data on a daily basis. So it's more of a general usage, again, because we don't want that kind of visibility into the private or the native side of the device. Can we track messages read or deleted without reading? We don't have the ability to track messages. We would be tracking more along the lines of like whether a document has been opened, for example, or if there is, for example, maybe a distributed required reading, we could provide that visibility. We could also work something into an end-user license agreement, for example, or we could look at integration with one of our applications for secure texting, for example, if you have concerns about maybe HIPAA compliance or sensitive information being shared. The negatives of using kiosk versus whitelist, that is, it depends on how restrictive you need to be, really. The whitelist on Android is going to be pretty powerful for you, but the kiosk is going to approve only the applications that have been kiosked, basically through policy. So the end users would be restricted from using a lot of the settings and the configurations that they might need out on the road, for example, if you're going to be more hands-off in terms of configuration. So you could streamline a kiosk policy. It just requires a little more admin time if there is any need to access anything on the device outside of those apps that are kiosked. Let's see. App wrapping, we can certainly get you information on. File export restrictions, certainly feel free to reach out if you would like more information about this or you wanted to set up a demo regarding the containerization of the data or your files. This allows us to set up restrictions so that if you're providing files to your end user, those files can't be moved to an outside application unless you've whitelisted that in advance. So, for example, if you've restricted file export of documents that are provided via SharePoint or Google Drive, we can make sure that that file is not opened in maybe your Gmail application or maybe a third-party application for document editing where you would lose control of it. So it's really boiling down again to that data leakage prevention and making sure that if you were to wipe a container off of a device with those sensitive documents, we would remove all of it, including anywhere that that information might have traveled through our secure editor, for example. And we are reaching the top of the hour here, so I do want to just kind of wrap up, but there are some questions that I did not get to. So if I didn't get to your question, feel free to get in touch with us. Again, we can set up as many conversations or demos as you might need to see this functionality in first person related a little more specifically to your environment. So we're happy to do that at any point with you.
Right, thank you, Lindsay, and thank you everyone for your questions. Just a quick reminder that you'll be receiving an email that'll provide you access to the recording and slides to today's event. That way you can review anything you missed or share it with others. Be sure to join us next time for Simple Steps to Secure EMM with MaaS360 on Tuesday, November 10th at 10 o'clock Eastern. We'll include the link to register for the next event and follow-up email. So on behalf of all of us here at IBM, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation and have a productive and secure rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thanks for your time, everyone.